Welcome back to the Explainer. I'm so thrilled you're here. Today we're embarking on this really fascinating biological journey, looking at exactly how our bodies interface with the world. Now, for our students tuning in, the exact production title of today's Explainer is Grade 9, Biology, Unit 09, Lesson 02, Organization of the Nervous System and the Senses. It's going to be an absolutely incredible look under the hood of human biology.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our mental map for today's explainer. We're going to hit our objective, break down the body systems, look at a practical example of drug effects, do a quick misconception check about our senses, run through a formative check, and then wrap it all up with a recap.
Let's kick things off right away with our specific learning goals for this explainer.
Our main objective today is to really master the organization of the nervous system, understand how our senses truly work, neutrally observe the biological effects of certain drugs, and map out the mechanics of the circulatory and respiratory systems. Basically, we're building this unified narrative of exactly how the body processes inputs from the environment and how it delivers vital outputs like oxygen and blood just to keep us functioning.
All right, Section 2, Explaining the Body Systems. We're going to start with the anatomical core of our explainer.
So your nervous system is essentially this massive, high-speed communication network, and it's got two main divisions. First up, we have the central nervous system, or CNS. You can think of this as the main processor, made entirely of your brain and your spinal cord. This is the command center, right? It's where signals are read, interpreted, and where all the big decisions are made. Then we have the peripheral nervous system, or PNS. If the CNS is the processor, the PNS is the vast network of cables, the nerves, branching out from the spinal cord to your organs, your arms, your legs, all the way down to your toes. It constantly relays information back and forth to that command center. And we can actually drill down a bit further into that peripheral nervous system because it splits into two functional parts. First is the somatic nervous system, which handles your voluntary movements. When you consciously decide to raise your hand or walk across a room, that's your somatic system at work. Conversely, the autonomic nervous system regulates your involuntary activities, the stuff you do without even thinking about it. We're talking heartbeat, breathing, digestion, even sweating. You don't have to consciously remind yourself to digest your lunch, right? Your autonomic system just handles the whole shebang for you.
Now that we know how the brain and nerves are organized, let's look at the systems keeping those actual cells alive. Trace the journey of a single inhaled breath with me. Air enters the nasal cavity, where it's instantly warmed and filtered. Then it travels down through your pharynx and larynx, right into the trachea, which is the sturdy tube held open by rings of cartilage. The trachea then branches into two primary bronchi entering the lungs, which branch into smaller and smaller tubes called bronchioles. Finally, the air reaches the alveoli. These are tiny thin-walled sacs that kind of look like microscopic bunches of grapes. There are literally millions of them. To put that into perspective, they create an estimated 100 square meters of surface area, that's roughly half a tennis court, all packed inside your chest. And this massive surface area is the exact site of gas exchange, where oxygen finally enters the bloodstream.
So, once that oxygen crosses those incredibly thin walls of the alveoli, where does it go? Well, it enters the circulatory system. Humans, just like all mammals, use what's called double circulation. This is a closed-loop system where your heart serves as a dual pump, driving two completely separate circuits. The pulmonary circuit pumps deoxygenated blood over to the lungs to pick up oxygen, and the systemic circuit pumps that freshly oxygenated blood out to the rest of the body's tissues. To maintain this double circulation, the heart goes through a continuous rhythmic sequence called the cardiac cycle. Step 1 is diastole. That's the relaxation phase where the heart chambers just fill up with blood. Step 2 is atrial systole, where the top chambers, the atria, contract to push blood down into the ventricles. And finally, step 3 is ventricular systole. This is where those large lower chambers contract powerfully to push blood out to the lungs and the body. Now, when the heart valve snaps shut after these contractions to keep blood from flowing backward, it creates that classic lub-dub sound of a heartbeat. And here's a pretty cool fact. Because the left ventricle has to pump blood through the entire systemic circuit, meaning the whole entire body, the left side of your heart is actually noticeably larger and more muscular than the right side.
Moving on to Section 3, Example, Drug Effects. Let's transition to a source-supported worked example to see how outside substances actually mess with these systems.
And this brilliantly illustrates the exact biological mechanisms of various drugs at the nerve synapse, which is the tiny gap where neurons communicate. Let's look at the cellular biology happening here.
Nicotine, for instance, mimics a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. It binds to receptors and triggers a prolonged response, while also stimulating the release of dopamine in the brain's pleasure centers. Lidocaine, which is a really common local anesthetic dentists use, acts by blocking voltage-gated sodium channels. It literally prevents the nerve from generating an action potential, which is exactly why you don't feel pain when they're working on your teeth. Cobra venom also targets acetylcholine receptors, but it blocks them entirely, which leads to fatal muscle paralysis. On the medical side of things, L-Dopa is a chemical precursor that the body converts into dopamine, helping to restore motor function for patients with Parkinson's disease. And finally, MDMA inhibits the reuptake of serotonin at the synapse, forcing this temporary artificial increase in serotonin levels in the brain. Each one of these really highlights just how incredibly sensitive our neural pathways are to chemical interference.
All right, Section 4, Misconception check. Senses. Let's shift our focus from internal chemical transmission to how our nervous system actually perceives the outside world.
Think about this for a second. Do humans really only have 5 senses? I mean, we've all been taught sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell since kindergarten, right? But is that actually biologically accurate?
Well, the answer is a resounding no. Our nervous system continuously processes a massive array of sensory inputs far beyond just those basic 5. For example, we have our vestibular sense, which handles our balance. We have proprioception, which is your internal awareness of exactly where your body parts are positioned in space. We've also got thermoception for detecting temperature changes, and nociception for sensing pain. Your brain is just constantly integrating all of these hidden senses behind the scenes so you can successfully navigate the world. Oh, and here is another incredibly common myth, the tongue map. For decades, textbooks claimed that the tip of your tongue tasted sweet things, the sides tasted sour, and the back tasted bitter. Well, actually, the biological fact is that taste receptors for all those flavor profiles are distributed everywhere. They're all over your tongue, the roof of your mouth, and even the back of your throat. Every area can detect all tastes. Now, what's really fascinating about this is how it completely reframes human vision. We tend to think our eyes operate like these high-definition video cameras, sending a flawless live feed straight to our brain. But in reality, our visual system prioritizes efficiency over perfection. The eyes just send fragments of data, light, edges, movement, and the brain processes this incredibly incomplete, upside-down input and literally fills in the gaps. It uses context, memory, and a whole lot of assumptions. So, what you are seeing right now is actually a mental reconstruction, not some objective, pixel-perfect reflection of reality. Wild, right?
Okay, Section 5, Formative Knowledge Check. We have covered a lot of ground today, and I want to challenge you to test your retention.
Question 1. Think back to the connection between the respiratory and circulatory systems. Which tiny blood vessels are the direct site of gas exchange with the alveoli in the respiratory system? Take a second. Okay, if you said the capillaries, you hit the nail on the head. The incredibly thin walls of both the alveoli and the surrounding capillaries allow oxygen and carbon dioxide to just easily diffuse right across. Question 2, let's test your memory of that drug effects table. How does lidocaine affect the nervous system's synapses to act as a local anesthetic? Well, it works by blocking voltage-gated sodium channels. By preventing sodium ions from rushing into the neuron, it completely stops the nerve from generating an action potential. And that means the pain signal simply never reaches your brain. All right, Section 6, Essential Concept Recap. Fantastic job so far. Let's bring it all home. So the crucial point to take away from all this is that human biology relies on highly integrated, beautifully complex systems. We mapped the nervous system from the central processor out to the peripheral nerves, noting the split between voluntary somatic and involuntary automatic actions. We followed the respiratory path all the way down to those gas-exchanging alveoli, and explored the double circulation and cardiac cycle pumping that oxygenated blood around. We broke down the specific synaptic mechanisms of 5 very different drugs. And finally, we updated our understanding of the senses, moving past that 5-sense myth and the old tongue map to embrace the true complex reality of human perception.
I want to leave you with this provocative thought as we close out today's explainer. If your brain simply fills in the visual gaps to prioritize efficiency over accuracy, constructing your daily perception based heavily on memories and assumptions, how much of the world you see right now is actually real? It's a fascinating question to ponder, for sure. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the brilliant biology of our bodies and keep that curiosity alive until next time.